So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Stephen Vazquez.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The new form of therapy I developed, I've trained hundreds of therapists to use it. It uses visual brain stimulation as in conjunction with interpersonal processes. And it amplifies the effect of counseling 10, 20 times, where, for example, emotional distress can change in minutes often. Frequently. So it's very different in that way. It's very fast, yet it's in depth. We can access deep unconscious material that comes to the surface rather rapidly. So it's a different approach, which when I did it, I was excited because we could get people better, faster. We could get to the core of the problem and begin to make changes that lasted long term. So I was excited about that, working with trauma, depression, anxiety disorders, and a number of things. But one of the things that kept coming up is without trying, without even talking about religion, people would have spiritual experiences with this work. And it would occur spontaneously. I mean, I had to get used to these nagging spiritual experiences that were just, I mean, somebody comes in for depression and before you know it, they find God. And so I'm thinking, I'm trying to think, what is this? Why is this happening? And then I began to pay attention to it, and I began to figure out how do you facilitate these experiences on purpose. And the third book was stimulated by the frequency of spiritual experiences that people are talking about. In addition to the spiritual experiences, people would have development of new abilities that they didn't have before. Abilities that were so profound that they were even afraid to tell their friends and families or whatever about it, because they felt like a freak in this world, although the abilities in many cases were quite profound and beneficial. But you get a lot of sort of, what do you say, circus view as though you're a freak in this world. And so what was happening is that people were getting better and they were having spiritual experiences. So that forced me to start looking at extended human abilities, which is, like, say, the fourth chapter in the last chapter in my book. See if this will actually work. I'm good at therapy. Let's see if I can make this work. Okay. When spiritual awakenings occur, often a side effect, I call it a side effect, is extended human capacities, abilities to do things they couldn't do before, and abilities to do things that the average person typically is not able to do. So some of the things that are happening these days are meditation has gotten popular in the last decade. Yoga has gotten popular in the last decade, and as you mentioned, near-death experiences, lots of studies, we're learning more about that. And then ETT is my emotional transformation therapy. Nature, research has shown that the most common experience of transcendence are nature scenes. So nature provokes that. And then a phenomenon called Kundalini. For those of you that aren't familiar with, it's actually a universal phenomenon, but it's the name is, in Indian culture, it has more explanation to it and terms for it. They've worked with it more so. So I would have people with my therapeutic work that would have spiritual awakenings and Kundalini awakenings. And I studied Kundalini, but I wasn't quite sure, many years ago what it was about. I read about it. That theory was great until one day in the 1980s, I had a gentleman come into my office and he said, "Doctor, help me. This thing keeps happening. I want to stop it." And he was desperate. And he comes in and I said, "Well, what is it?" And he says, "Well, I can't put it in words. It keeps happening to me and I just want to stop it." And so I said, "Well, can you show me?" So he gets on the floor and his eyes rolled back. All you could see was the whites of his eyes. My first thought was he's going into a seizure, okay? But what happened next was a series of yoga postures. Now mind you, this person has never taken a yoga class in his life. He was a foreman in a construction firm. He wasn't religious whatsoever. So his eyes were rolled back. All you could see were the whites of his eyes. And he would switch every minute or two to another complex yoga posture, including the mudras, everything. He must have done 25 of them in one session. So, and he didn't know what it was and why it was happening. It was spontaneous. You could tell his pants were twisted, and he was oblivious to his clothes. And when he went through these yoga postures one after another, never took a yoga class, this gentleman, he had trouble stopping it. I thought, my gosh, we're going to be here all day with this, but it finally did come to stop before the session was over after some urging. And so I dedicated myself to understand this phenomena of Kundalini, and I'm glad I did, because with this work I do, often it spurs that to take place, and it looks rather peculiar when you have involuntary bodily movements take place, when you start perceiving inner lights, when you go through intense heat or intense cold, and other symptoms. I have a list of all the symptoms of them in one of my books, in this particular book, the second book I wrote. It's a whole chapter that I wrote on this business. And so I've been investigating that and working with that. And so I knew that if I was doing this type of therapy and was provoking it, we needed to understand how to help people with it should it occur. Because it's a purging. You could call it a cleansing process. It purifies you. Now in the purification, what happens is that all your stuff comes up. Things that were buried, unresolved issues emotionally and physically. People often experience physical pain. They may experience paralysis. They may experience a lot of things. And so I have a whole practice where I help people through these kinds of experiences. And with the population of meditation and yoga, I got a lot of people whose yoga teachers nor their meditation teachers didn't recognize it, this peculiar behavior that occurred. And of course, if it occurred in churches, some churches, it would be unrecognizable, and they would send them to a psychiatrist or to a physician because it was too peculiar. But subsequent to this awakening, a number of extended human capacities developed. People with a number of things such as development of telepathy. That's pretty interesting when you're doing therapy and they're one step ahead of you as you go through that. But I mean, it's just, and then a part of you goes, it's just an accident. Then it happens again and again and again. Glossolalia, which is known in some churches as speaking in tongues. I looked up the research about this because I had 3 different people that had this phenomena. None of them had gone to churches where they talked about speaking in tongues. And one of them actually was she came in already being able to do it because she was pretty famous for hers, and they actually detected, her words were examined, and it was actually a form of the Persian language, which she had never been exposed to. The others had a more less understandable phenomena. As I looked up the research and the brain scans on people that have had this spontaneously, what occurs is basically the emotional parts of your brain are activated, but the language parts are not. So you have this type of sound that comes up, but the person feels the uplifting experience, but their articulation is not in a language that's detectable that we know about most of the time. Prophecy. It's interesting to be doing therapy with somebody and prophecies begin to come out of their mouth, some surprises of that type. Astral travel. If you've never experienced that, some people are quite surprised to be able to do that, for that to take place. You know it by term of out-of-body experiences, like when you're in a car wreck or a catastrophe, but this is a voluntarily type of movement out of one's body. Expanded intelligence. I had an experience personally with working with transcendental meditation since the 1970s. I did it twice a day frequently for many years. And I just sort of got by in school. I made it through college, but I even flunked out at one time. I didn't do that well. I got into graduate school under probation. But as I was doing that, I was doing this meditation. By the time I finished, it was all A's, and I made the highest grades ever made in the university on the comprehensive exams. My my intelligence just changed. All I can tell you is I never could do that before. And so I looked up the research, and sure enough, there were 3 studies evaluating the elevation of IQ with frequent meditation, particularly transcendental meditation. So there are 3 studies, and then I felt, oh, okay, I can come out and talk about it now. But my poor wife married one person, and then she had another one over time. So your intelligence, it's been purported that that's happened. Now we have research to support that. After death communication, develop processes in which I'm not picking up, I'm not being the other person or telling them what their deceased partner is saying or whatever, but there's a process that allows them to have direct communication with it. And there's another person before me has actually documented this scientifically with veterans, and it's a whole form of after death. You see, you have what's called, like say, tombstone dialogue, which usually is a cathartic experience, and then you have mediums that pick it up. Well, this is neither of this. This is facilitating that person and their deceased person to dialogue with each other. Spiritual wisdom. There are times when I'm working with people and they hit the spiritual experience where their ability comes up to have wisdom, and I'm just sitting there trying to be a therapist but just listening because they come up with some things just through their own psyche. Automatic writing. They are often sometimes have a spontaneous need to write, and in some of my books there were times in which I wrote whole chapters just straight through. It just came to me straight through. I'd like to say that happened with all of them, but it was a bigger struggle for most of the rest of them. But I have had that experience at least once. And then spiritual healing, which is a phenomenon that sometimes is a side effect from an awakening. I had one man come into my office that was he was traumatized because he was out camping with a buddy, and his buddy injured himself. He spontaneously did some healing work. The person got better, but it freaked him out to the point that he came to therapy. What is this? What happens? We're not prepared for these kind of things. And so myself had those experiences as well. So that's one of the things I've done. I've been a subject of scientific studies for this type of healing work. And so you can see why I have sort of a kindred spirit. I want to support these people that have this experience, because it comes with a lot of problems as well. Most Americans are not prepared for these unusual experiences. I'm talking about even yoga teachers and meditation teachers. If you meditated twice a day, daily for years, it's very different than a guided meditation here and there. This is a phenomenon that actually shifts your brains, and there's a lot of research to support it. It's not speculation anymore. So the controversies, and even every religion has not every religion, most religions have controversies about extended abilities. One form of Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism, look at these extended abilities as cautious. These are not good. They're wary of them. Whereas Mahayana Buddhism sees it as a good thing that happens. And it happens in Christian churches as well. Some spiritual teachers in India, the Sikh siddhis are special abilities and gifts. Others warn against them. I had a woman that came to see me that she said that she'd had, I forget what it was, but it was a serious life-threatening illness at one point in her life. She was desperate, so she goes to a Filipino healer, and it got better. And then she begins to attend a certain type of Christian church, and they told her it was evil because it wasn't within her church's parameters. So I said, but now you got over it. You were going to die. You got over it, and you're better, and it hasn't come back. Is that correct? She says, yes. But you think it was wrong because it doesn't fit that philosophy? And she said, yes. I didn't try to convince her. It's just interesting to see what people do with that. But it's a controversial thing. It looks peculiar. It's odd. People don't know what to do with it most of the time. Here's one thought about it, and this is my thought. I have to own that. Spiritual evolution. Some believe that the increasing number of people experiencing extended human capacities represents advancing spiritual evolution of the species. It may be our destiny to advance spiritual human evolution toward a new level of life. In other words, if this were keep continuing, generations in the future these would be the norm. Right now, these are the oddballs in our society, and there's a lot of struggle whenever you have advancements of various types. Michael Murphy did research on extended human capacities, and so here are this is the list of what he came up with. Extraordinary perceptions of things outside the organism, including apprehensions of numinous beauty in familiar objects, voluntary clairvoyance in contact with entities or events that are inaccessible to the ordinary senses. Does that talk to you? Do you understand what we're saying here? So you perceive things that others may not, that are extraordinary, that we can't normally see or hear with our normal five senses. Extraordinary somatic awareness and self-regulation. People that sometimes can have things go awry and correct their own bodies through self-regulation practices, and would shock people that that's possible at times. I think maybe my interest in this started when I was 7 years old, and I had at that time a condition that was called polio. Before the salt vaccine, I was paralyzed from the waist down, and had a spiritual experience around that time, and people were dying. At that time, it was a crisis. People were dying around me, kids I knew. I was 7 years old. And, but I looked back and I came from that idea is that anything's possible, even if you can't understand what it is. And so I must have had that experience, I think, to get me to where I look at these things like I do. And so I've had the good fortune of a lot of things. I once had arthritis in this hand. I don't have it anymore. There are ways to work with that. I injured my ankle. I was supposed to go to New York in a couple of days. They fit me with, ever had one of those boots that you get fit with? For 6 weeks I was supposed to be in it. Well, the 2 days I didn't have it, and I don't have the problem anymore at all. I don't mean I can conquer everything, but I've had a few things that were pretty outstanding. So this has been an interest of mine. Okay, extraordinary communication abilities, including transmission of thoughts, volitions, and ecstatic states through extrasomatic modalities. Superabundant vitality that is difficult to account for in terms of ordinary bodily processes. Have you ever had an experience where you had abundant energy, didn't even sleep for a couple days, the energy persisted? Anybody had that experience? Okay, a few of you have had that. So that can happen for sure, but it's odd. Extraordinary movement abilities. This, I can't say, it doesn't happen to me all the time, but I recall in sports, I was playing tennis with my friend one time. There came a point in which the ball appeared to look bigger. The tennis court seemed smaller, and it felt like I could go to any position instantly, and it was just a short period of time. I can't say I played tennis like that all the time, but we did have a portion of the time where there was this feeling about it that it was like I could do anything at that particular time. Anybody ever had those experiences in sports or something? Okay, so
in the zone.
Yes, some people call it. There's books about it. In the zone, you could say. A lot of athletes have had those moments of that at times. Extraordinary capacities to alter environment, including exceptional hand-eye skills, abilities to influence things at a distance without reliance upon direct physical actions, as, for example, spiritual healing. And then this one's fun. Self-existent delight, which does not depend upon the satisfaction of needs and desires in the manner of ordinary pleasure, and which persists through sickness and other adversity. It's odd to have this silly smile on your face when things are not going well, but this experience is happening. And supreme intellectual capacities evident in some works of genius, by which artistic or other productions are apprehended, taught ensemble all at once. And the unitive knowledge inherent in mystical experience, which differs radically from ordinary thinking. Have you ever had a whole mass of ideas, concepts come to you all at once? You just knew them? Anybody ever had that experience? Okay. You could describe it as that, yeah. So these are things that Murphy's identified as another type of extraordinary or extended abilities. Volition exceeding ordinary will, which unifies separate impulses to produce extraordinary actions. There's an odd thing that it's not, for me I describe it as simultaneous intention and surrender that occurs. And so I wouldn't call that ordinary will. It's a little different thing. That's my interpretation. I'm not sure. So I think Michael Murphy meant by this. Then personhood, that simultaneously transcends and fulfills one's ordinary sense of self while revealing one's fundamental unity with others. You got a strong sense of your authentic self. At the same time, you see it in context of all the unity of things around you simultaneously. And then, this may be my favorite one. Love that transcends ordinary needs and reveals a fundamental unity with others. Number 12, alterations in bodily structures, states, and processes that support the experiences and capacities just noted. So those are the 12 that he identified from his research. And the idea, one idea here that some of us think is that these indications, I saw a number of hands go up as I was talking about these things. So thank God I'm not alone. There's a lot of people who are having this. I was hoping to develop some kindred spirits in here with this. These things happen to people, but it's not sometimes socially appropriate to talk about it in certain circles. And what I would do is I work with people that maybe have these abilities, but they've been shunned, they've been not accepted well in their communities, and so I have to work with that part of them. There are a lot of people that can have profound spiritual experiences and their personal life is a disaster. You know, it's possible to have both. It doesn't necessarily mean it's all going to flow naturally and easily for you. So one of the people I was working with years ago was an atheist, and her family was an atheist. All her friends were atheists, and she comes to see me. She has panic attacks. She'd been through every psychiatrist and therapist in the area, and nothing worked. So she came to see me. After a few months, we got the panic attacks under control. And then one day, I was working with her, and you got to know this. This person never been to church, a total atheist. She says she's experiencing the presence of God. Okay? So, of course, I supported her, and she believed she could see God and communicate with God. And in my field, I know my colleagues. They would think, yeah, this person is psychotic, you know. So, but I could tell that the way she functioned was very positive, constructive. It wasn't a problematic issue. So I thought, I got to get a brain scan of this so that let's see if it's pathological, it'll show up on the brain scan. It's pretty obvious, and if it's not, it'll be interesting to see what we have. So I actually was with her because she felt this presence when I was with her. So she asked me to be with her, and we did this brain scan. And just let me show you what it was like before and how this works. The white areas are areas of activity of anxiety in her particular case, where there's excessive activity in the brain. The red is a little less activated, and the blue is the calmest. And if you look at this brain from 4 different angles. So this person, this was the before I worked with her, what it looked like. I want you to take note of it because I'm going to show you the after. So as we did that, the next thing I did was after I worked with her and she had the God experience, and she was feeling that she was seeing and communicating with God as this one was taken. Now, do you see a difference in this scan? Yes. What you have here, There's only white in what's called the occipital lobe, the visual cortex of the brain, which doesn't mean that she saw God, but it means that her brain is acting as though she's seeing something. But all the rest of her brain is totally calm. And everybody else I've had look at this, they've never seen a SPECT scan like this where the brain was that calm except in the visual part of the brain. So this is not the brain scan of someone who is psychotic. It doesn't even look close to it. So it's just, as a professional with my colleagues, I wanted to get a picture because, again, I would not be believed. Yes?
So you did this scan while she was seeing God?
Yes.
Or right after or before?
And while she was.
So she was seeing God for a long period of time?
A period of time. Yes.
Were her eyes open at the time?
Her eyes, actually, I was there with part of the procedure. It's called a SPECT brain scan. I wasn't there for the whole procedure because they had to, just the way they had to set it up. We can't say, yes, she saw God. But what we can say is the brain scan sure looks different. She sure looks calm, calmer than any brain scan that most people have ever seen. So it was nice to have evidence. When I'm dealing in this area, I want as much scientific evidence as I can get because I could get discredited real quick and easy in my field. And it's already a challenge when you come up with anything new. So extended human abilities have been something that I had to deal with because it kept happening, and I needed to know what to do with these people. So let me go back. So I spent a lot of time getting them, giving them support. People that there was a meeting in Dallas when I worked in the Dallas area in which there were psychics, mediums from all over the country met at this conference, and they did one study, and 93% of them had sexual abuse in their background. So this is fine, you can have this ability, but there's other issues that make it very difficult to adapt to. So I want to touch on this part here. Some of the different things with, like you heard, there's going to be something on near-death experience pretty soon here. But let me give you a little overview of some of the research on near-death experience. So about 15 million people have experienced near-death events in the U.S. So they also have, what's weird is they also have traumatic psychological experiences like shock, avoidance, flashbacks, a lot of things. At the same time, they have the other. So it's a mixed bag. So they have both symptoms of unresolved trauma and profound spiritual events. So you got quite a mixture. Near-death experiences often produce a brain shift in the person that is profound and often not understood. Here's an example. There's a 24 to 26 point rise in IQ of children who had near-death experiences. This jump took place immediately after the experience. There's a noticeable decrease in children's ability to express themselves. There's an increase in nonverbal intelligence and creative problem solving. Children experience a confusion of good and evil, and the boundary separating one reality from another disappears. I had one person that I saw, very bright woman, was an attorney, and she said that she had 2 or 3 near-death experiences below age 5 as a child. And when she was 5 years old, an uncle died, and she didn't understand what the big deal was because she could still see him. He was visible to her, but everybody was crying and whatnot, and there she could see him. And so those stories she told me. So, sure.
So did she lose that ability?
She, I don't remember whether she lost that or not. She had, no, she was an adult. Like she was like,
She hadn't had it
she was about 45 or so, but this happened when she was a child. But she learned how to be socially careful about what she disclosed. So I didn't get all the information actually, but I'll just say she was different and super bright. So other factors with that, children experience a confusion of good and evil, and the boundary separating one reality from another disappears. There's a contrast in ego development, which sometimes there's people with these abilities go into states of superiority. Obviously they can do things other people can't, and your ego gets a hold of that, and then you have a new problem. So it's a big adjustment to have developed these abilities. So the traumatic experiences from near-death experiences are quite challenging, but these people with near-death experiences have strong compensation skills. 96% of everybody that has near-death experiences lose their fear of death. So that's a very different phenomena. You can say that you're not afraid of it until it gets close, but the people who have near-death experience actually seem to be quite different. There's other data which you'll probably get if you get to go to this conference he was mentioning about, but basically it opens them sometimes to new abilities that they didn't have before. I'm going to open this to questions at this point. Anything about this extended human capacity idea? Questions? Anybody has? Yes, ma'am.
So I'm just curious what you think it is about your work that seems to have a proclivity towards extended human capacities.
Oh, I love that question.
Do you think it's just you, or do you think there's I mean, it sounds like you have a process that you teach other people to do. So
I do.
what do you think is the key that helps to open these doors?
Well, every major religion on the planet uses the term light to depict the divine. And I think a lot of people think it's only analogy, symbol, or metaphor. But I think there's something having to do with actual physical light. And in quantum physics, there is a connection between the consciousness and such things as energy, light, matter. They're not separate. There's a continuum there. In my work, because I use light, that's what I suspected. People would have, and you can see it when I have people that have had near-death experiences, they love this work. The light has a different quality for those people, typically. So I think actual physical light, as I use it, seems to be something that provokes that. Our brains are, don't let me get carried away, but I'll give you a long answer. Of the 3 billion brain cells, over 2 billion of them are generated by or activated by visual brain stimulus. So our vision is a major part of our brain. It's the dominant part. Of all our senses, 80% of the input is from visual stimuli, not hearing, smell, and the others. So, but the visual neural network goes to different parts of the brain, not just to the visual cortex that allows us to see, but it goes to parts of our brain that are responsible for physiology, for emotional states, for cognition, not just ability to see. So it's very extensive throughout our brain. And so I've developed a way to tap into that potential. If you can know exactly what you're doing, which exact wavelength of light you want to use for, let's say, depression or some certain emotional state, we have a rapid change of that particular state. So it's pretty precise now as to how I go about that. So I think light is one of the factors, but the interpersonal process is important. If a person's not comfortable to surrender and open up and share what's going on with them, they're going to block that capacity. So it's both the interpersonal and the actual use of light itself. I think that would have come up with what seems to do it.
So are you using a device that has specific frequencies and wavelengths of
Yes, but I have other things as well. I have them. I'll show you some of them today. Okay. I work with something that's very non-technical. That's a pair of goggles that allows the light to enter the periphery of your eyes. But little tiny beams of light, and it's stunning what can happen with just tiny bits of light coming in at angles into your eyes. I use this primarily with people with migraine headaches where they don't, visual stimulus is too much for them. But this is very precise. The whole process is very precise. I developed an entirely different form of eye movement therapy. Some of you may have heard of EMDR. Well, there's been 3 other forms of eye movement therapy subsequent to that. Mine is one of them, which is very rapid and very substantial in its impact. And that has to do with the angle at which the movement at which their eyes are moving. There's a specific way we do that that's very precise. This chart over here is one thing that I use, one of the 4 tools, and then the light device, which I haven't put up together. We can access any of hundreds of specific wavelengths of light And believe me, each one of them affects the brain in different ways, and I've put together what it does. For example, if you felt intruded on, like people are invading your personal space, there's a specific wavelength of light that I use that activates what's called temporal-parietal juncture in your brain, and that's the part of your brain that helps differentiate yourself from others. And so what happens if somebody has had a history of violation and intrusion, when you activate this, they suddenly feel a buffer, a space between them, and so they don't, that intrusion possibility, the boundary, we actually create boundaries that weren't there before. I could go on, but don't get me started. I could go on to this. But anyway, I teach courses in this. I've written 3 books on it, so I have a lot to say about it. But it's a combination of light and the interpersonal process that is the power. So it's a new concept, and we're trying to get the word out about it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, what success rate do you have?
I don't have it in terms of numbers, but I honestly, I can't remember it not working in some time now, but it depends. I work with a variety of different conditions. Primarily trauma, I'd say I work with most. It's a high yield. Just to give you an example, I had the data where a woman took a test about depression before we started and after. She came from Houston just about a month ago. I saw her for 1 week, 5 days. She'd been collapsed on the floor for 1.5 years, barely eating, profoundly depressed, and so forth. We had 5 days, and we had the before and after, and basically all of it changed. Sent her back to Houston. People come in. I had a person fly in from Belgium with the Kundalini phenomena that I worked with for 1 week. So I have a lot of people that fly in for treatment, but unfortunately I get them after they've tried everything else. And so I work with a lot of extreme cases in that particular way. Yes, ma'am.
You didn't say anything about people who have changes in the human electrical potential. In other words, no longer have a human electrical potential, but it's been raised.
Mm-hmm. I haven't seen the evidence for that, so I don't know about it.
People that put out lights and
Oh yeah.
like the street lights, or
Yeah.
can blow out the whole system on a block.
I just haven't met people that do that. After doing this, I'm open to whatever's possible at this point.
Keep her away from your equipment.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Doctor, you mentioned that people who have some of these experiences, and it was in the category Kundalini, have some weird things that makes them feel like oddballs.
Mm-hmm.
And then you made an unusual statement. You said, these people the time will come when they won't be the oddball because everybody else will catch up with them, as a paraphrase.
Mm-hmm.
But the question that I'm curious about is, if there is something that happens to some people as a result of this thing called Kundalini, is there a possibility that these experiences they have are like road marks on a path to the target of evolution? Are we going someplace that we can see that there is a target?
It's speculative, but I think that's possible. I suspect that's what's happening. There's an evolution of spirituality, and these are just some of the things. You could call them hazards on the road or benefits. It could work either way in order to get there. The Kundalini is a purification process, but when you're purifying, a lot of unpleasant things may arise during the process as you're throwing them off. Anger that you forgot about, that you were mad, when 20 years ago, could emerge. And re-experiencing of physical pain and a variety of things that can happen as the energy is moving through the body. Those blockages promote those things. And so, but what's different is traditional Indian work, those things, they have ways to guide people through that. With this new work that I do, we're pretty efficient about moving them through those blockages. And so it speeds up the process and reduces the amount of misery that people go through when they're in the purging process. So yeah, I think that's what's happening. That's a guess. Yes?
So your process
is not to get people to experience this.
No.
It's to get them through their trauma, and this is a side effect.
Sometimes this happens. I'm going to say maybe 1 in 10, 1 in 15. It doesn't happen to everybody, but it happened enough that I had to get very good understanding of it and get better at processing that, helping people process through that. Yes, sir.
Have you worked with people who are blind?
I have. Do you have a question about that?
Yeah, I'm wondering about, is it stimulation of visual pathways, or is it light absorption through the skin?
Well, okay.
Wave absorption, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've worked it with, I've used it with energy work myself. I had the distinct honor and privilege in 1987 to see a woman's vision restored that she was blind from birth through the energy work that I did. Subsequent to the energy work, I developed the light work. One of my colleagues worked with a blind man that had physical pain. Imagine him sitting in front of the light device, and he's asking, is it on? Can't even tell whether the light is on or not, okay? But she worked with him and resolved the pain. The reason for that is, again, there are neural pathways that don't go to the visual cortex, that go to other parts of the brain, and we were still able to facilitate a change in that particular case. We haven't done enough of them to say if it's always going to work, but that's what's happened so far. So I mean, think about it. When you, let's say, if you've looked at a beautiful mountain, it doesn't just, it's not just something you see. Doesn't it affect your entire being? You can tell that the whole visual cortex in your brain is activated in many ways where you feel different physically, emotionally, not just do you see it. I have this problem when I see beautiful women. I just feel good all over. And so it's a pleasant sight to see. And I'm not just neutral, there's that beautiful woman. I'm going, whoa, there's that beautiful woman. So it affects your psyche, it affects your whole being. And that's because the visual neural network goes throughout the brain, the vast majority of the brain. Great questions. Anybody else? Don't ask me anything on light, I'll tell you the answer. Anybody else have any questions? Yes. Uh-huh.
With light, does it matter if you blink the light at a sine wave or a square wave?
Some people think it does. Mine doesn't. My device I use doesn't distinguish that. And I haven't seen a pragmatic reason to say it does, but some people believe it does. So I don't have the answer for that, but my experience with the different kinds of waves is that I haven't needed to go there to get the effects I'm getting. So there are some devices that can be made that way, and I don't use those. Other questions? Anybody else? Yes.
Did you design your own device? Or
Well,
are you using light sound machines?
okay,
What kind of
if
technology?
some of y'all saw me getting this to turn on, you know I'm not a high-tech guy. So what happens is, fortunately, I have a high-tech guy that I taught him what we needed, and he put it together. This gentleman, the light device, the therapy changed his life, and he just had to see what was inside of it, how it worked, and he became the person that we have that does this. And I just tell him what I want, and he makes it. So don't ask me too technological questions, but I just know how to work it. Just like a pilot sometimes feels a personal bond with his plane. Well, I feel that with my light equipment, but doesn't mean I haven't been able to generalize it to my technology expertise in general. Yes.
Well, I love light work, and I have all kinds of equipment, so I'm kind of curious what yours looks like. Are you putting a mask on people? Are you having different handheld things? The lights you're shining into different points on the body? In the
No,
eyes?
I don't shine on the points of the body. This all goes through the eyes. There are 4 modalities of visual brain stimulation. So a light emitting device is only one of them. That chart there is the second one. I have some peripheral goggles which I brought somewhere. I'll show you those. And also the eye movement process as well. So it's not like I am, actually some things look rather simple, but nobody's done them before and they work. Yes, for example, these are what the peripheral goggles look like. And the therapist, no high tech here, therapists can control this. I worked with a guy just before I came here, tinnitus, ringing in his ears. One position, the right ear is better. The other position, the left ear is better. The other position, the tone changes. Another position, the aggravation about it decreases. And you see it shift with each peripheral position that you're using this. And so the numbers on the clock numbers are on the front there, so the therapist can see what they're doing with it. So this is simple. So we're controlling the tiny bit of beams of light that are entering the eyes at different angles, and we're controlling the angles of it. If we get a chance, I mean, I'd love to do a demo if you want that. Other questions? Yes, ma'am, you had a question?
I have a question.
Yes.
When a person starts experiencing non-ordinary perception, now, I come across a lot of people who fashion themselves as intellectuals who feel like they're the ones who are smarter because they're skeptical, and so the other person, I say me, I'm just psychotic, right? I just don't have a process of fact-checking in my life. But I feel like after several years, there's a lot of parts of my logic that I find other people are illogical. And so how would you reduce the suffering of the person who feels like, well, am I psychotic? Because we are more interested in checking if we are pathological than the so-called objective person, really. It's very personal.
Well, I'll give you an example of what I do. At a class I'm teaching in California, one woman, you could tell she was very nervous. She finally got up the nerve, and I encouraged her, and she reported to the class that she sees dead people all the time, near them and around them and so forth. She'd never disclosed this in public, but we had a pretty good group. So I asked her, okay, you're married, correct? You work, and your work is working well. You're functioning in your life well. I asked her every question I could ask her about pragmatism, and she was functioning perfect. Now, if you're psychotic, you don't do all that. So this woman, she sees dead people, but all the rest of her life is functioning just fine. And she's making a living, she's married, she does all the usual stuff. So I told the class, so here's an example of somebody that has an extraordinary experience, but they're not unbalanced about it. They're functioning in their life well. So that's one way of measuring it. How's your practical life? And in her case, she was afraid to disclose it. She just wanted him to go away. She didn't even want to see him. And the first time that she sort of accepted it, and I supported her with that. And as she gets more comfortable, she may come out a little bit more and maybe use her skill in some way. But that's what I guide people on, how to do that, because they're frightened and they feel odd and peculiar. But these dead people just wouldn't go away. She kept seeing them, and every now and then she'll tell somebody about somebody and they ask them questions, and she was correct, but she just was uncomfortable with the experience, and we got her a little bit more comfortable. I'll have to call her and see where she is now on that. Does that respond to your question? I'm interested in is their life functioning? It's great to have these skills and abilities. And the other thing about the extended human capacities, is that throwing you off your path, your spiritual path, or is that helping it? Some people get enamored with their skills and lose their way. The extended capacities occurred because they had a spiritual awakening. I try to get them back on track a lot on their path, not get completely enamored with the whole thing. Yeah.
Well, I think sometimes, though, you can have a spiritual breakthrough that's so profound that what did work in your life doesn't work anymore.
That's true.
And so there's a transition period when you become used to being this new person.
Right, that's right.
And
Yeah.
your life has to reflect that new reality. So,
So I just help them with the transition. It's a transitional state. Anybody else? Another question? I don't know how we're doing on time, Joe. Are we on time?
We're good.
Okay. Other questions? Yes, sir.
I'd like, go
I
ahead.
am a psychology doctoral student at a PhD. A couple questions.
Okay.
My first question is, when you mention people after the near-death experience, sort of having an increase in IQ, and I think you mentioned nonverbal reasoning, called fluid reasoning. Kind of going back to the psychology of it, what is the mechanism through which someone who's experiencing that near-death experience, has that increase in IQ? Like, what's going on there?
I can't answer that. All the studies I've seen, they just have the evidence that the change has taken place, and they're still being investigated as to why. Maybe at this conference, there may be somebody that can give you more information about the exact mechanisms that are taking place. But clearly, there's shifts in the way the brain is functioning, and there does need to be more studies and understanding exactly what that is and why. My one scan is all I had to offer from my own personal experience with the client. But I can't answer your question, but I bet it's already been researched. I just haven't found that yet.
Yeah, and my second question is, because I know that I was reading about, sort of your publishing of some of your work, documenting it. Did you do it with, was it like a randomized control trial? Was it a case trial, single design? What was your?
We're still in the process of getting research specifically on this. What I did initially is I found the research that supported these processes. So they're not like just out of left field. There is some actual scientific data for each of the positions that I take in my book. We're still in the process of actually researching this method itself. And so I've been better at doing the work than I have been at researching it and marketing it, because I'm not a researcher. We're looking for researchers. You got anybody there? Connect me, please. We have a lot to show. So we need more of that at this point. Yes?
Would you say that you have experience because you worked with people and doing this stuff, working with people that have had these kind of abilities for years, but haven't done a whole lot with them?
Sometimes that's the case.
My biggest problem is that my near-death experience was in 1985, and I've been most of this stuff has been in the closet for a really long time, and it's time. I feel like I have to do more with it, and I'm just in fact, somebody gave me your name and said you were who I needed to see, and then I got an email, a month later.
I work with
plan for people that need to integrate these
That's
things.
exactly what I do. And in India, there's a term called sahaja, which has to do with the integration of the spiritual and the pragmatic. And it's just because I've been blessed with seeing several people of these kinds of skills and saw what their issues were. I just got better just over time working with that. That's probably why they gave you my name. Some therapists say, I don't know what to do, just go see him. And so I get a whole variety of very different clients sometimes.
Good, I hope you got a card.
Okay, and yes, sir.
Stephen, can you address the question about spiritual evolution? And you said about, how odd are these new norms? I'm convinced that there is a global groundswelling that is not in the public perception, but it is taking place within the hearts and minds of the multitudes globally.
I suspect that's happening. I can't, this is just speculation, but I suspect that that's my sense of it as well. Some people, due to the recent political unrest in our country, have a perception that things are going in a different direction than that. But sometimes these kind of challenges are what provokes changes in people that may cause them to rise beyond where they were before. So anyway, that's just my perspective on it. So, but right now it's not a popular view because of that. Yeah.
I think there's also evidence that it's cyclical.
Yes.
For thousands of years, that these type of changes happen. So
At the very least, we know about it more because of the internet and publishing and so forth. So some of these things, for example, the people who, 66% of people who had a child that died, report that they've seen them or made contact with them subsequent to the child's death. They come in my private counseling office, they disclose this, and they think they're the only ones, but there's research on it, but still it's not generally acceptable thing in this society. If you're a Native American, it's acceptable. If you're other cultures, but not here. And so people think that what's accepted in our culture is probably right or the only things way too often. Yes?
That, for me, just stimulates the thought that it's common in grief for people to experience the presence or receive their deceased loved ones for a period of time after the death, 6 months or so being kind of a demarcation point in which a person tends to fade. And I just wonder if it's not the jolt of the experience that liberates the talent or the ability or whatever during that period, but because we don't have societally structural ways of supporting that it then dissipates over time, the ability.
I think that exact thing. I agree with you. Because I see people with trauma, and there's a thing called post-traumatic growth. Some people can experience growth from a trauma where they're better than they were before they ever had the trauma. Depends on what you do with it. And I like to try to facilitate those types of things. And so it cracks your facade, your pattern, your old pattern, it destroys all that. And you have to be sort of reborn to function again sometimes. And I like to help people get to that point whenever possible. So I see it exactly as you do as well. So are there other questions? Yes?
Rudolf Steiner teaches that this is the most difficult culture in the country in the world to be spiritual in. And so in that statement, I always try to ask myself, so why am I here? Well, I guess I need a little bit more resistance to make the same argument.
Yeah. Yeah, there's lots of people trying to make sense of it, yeah. Other questions, anybody? Yes, sir.
So we mentioned sort of when other therapists refer their clients out to you. So thinking about trauma, so let's say the therapist is like a trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapist, and they're seeing it's not working. What would you say your form of therapy, the light or the transcendent therapy, is sort of addressing that other sort of modalities aren't, like CBT aren't addressing trauma?
First of all, it's focused on emotion, the primacy of emotion. We change emotional states, cognition changes, behavior changes as a byproduct. Other people go at it from a different angle. Often, when people try to get your thinking straight in cognitive therapy, fine, you understand how to think about it, but you're still crying. The emotion still hasn't shifted. We go directly after shifting the emotional states, first and foremost. So it's an experiential form of therapy. I have to get people to get in touch with emotions in order to facilitate the change the most rapidly. And so we have ways of identifying dissociation and shifting people to where they're in the present and fully present. 46.9% of the time, our minds are wandering, okay? So the majority of the time, we're not here. And so if you're doing talk therapy with somebody who half the time is not with you or not present, it's got to be limited. We have ways to change the dissociation to where psychological presence is taking place, which I think is a major factor on why we proceed so quickly, why it changes that. And so emotion is the primary focus. I'm not against cognitive and behavioral, but that's secondary for us. The key is to shift emotional states. That's what makes it different in that way. And the visual stimulation, along with the understanding of the attachment and the bonding with the person, accelerates it all. So it's an accelerated process in that sense. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, so whereas the cognitive therapist might enter it through cognitions and thoughts and automatic beliefs, you all go directly to emotion and then sort of make changes there in addition to the interpersonal process.
Right. And there are things that, like addictions and trauma, that the main parts of the brain where the sources of that are not accessible to conscious verbal dialogue. These things are buried in what's called implicit emotional memory. And you have to have, I think, an efficient process to access the source of these issues in order to facilitate changes. And the visual stimulation does that quite well. Other questions? Anybody? Yes?
You say we, is that
Yes.
guides or-
I founded the method, and we have hundreds of people around the country that do this method. So we as ETT practitioners, I guess, is what I mean by that. So I hope somebody keeps doing it when I die and somebody else continues the process. Yes.
Have you heard of TRE,
Um,
trauma release?
yeah, there's lots of, I think I've heard of it.
It's sort of like the Kundalini experience that you were talking about in terms of bodily control put down to the brain stem rather than going into the cognition. That's what they say. So, I mean, I think when you describe the Kundalini, I think you're talking about a similar type of thing where the body is moving without the conscious thought of it.
Well, I wouldn't just say that. I'm not sure about that comparison, but because Kundalini is often a slow process, a slow purification process. Occasionally it can be rapid, but it doesn't look like a spiritual experience to the average person if you saw it, unless you were familiar with the symptoms. So what you're talking about sounds like a little faster trauma release approach.
Yeah, it's the idea that the vibration, like animals, like when I hold my cat and I let the cat down, the cat more often than not will shake his head. Per head.
Yes.
Literally shake it off.
Yeah, yes.
So there's some sense, there's comfort with holding the cat, but as you release it, the cat's been somewhat traumatized in terms of changing their awareness of being held to being released. They'll always shake their head. Well, this gentleman who created TRE found that was something children did in
Yes.
Lebanon with bombings, and
Yes.
adults didn't, and it led to this process. And he created basically an exercise routine
Oh, yes. I
that will
think,
get you to, so it's pretty amazing because at the end of it, your hips are going like this.
yeah.
And
We
you
have,
don't even have any control over it.
right. Yeah, that's
No conscious control over it. You have a recognition of it. So, and it's very therapeutic.
there are a lot of, I'm going to get trauma mixed up exactly with Kundalini. There are a lot of involuntary movement disorders, everything from ADHD to Tourette syndrome to conversion disorders. Those are all, they may have spontaneous bodily movements, but it's not this, you have to differentiate that from Kundalini, which has a spiritual direction in it. It's different. So those other forms of bodily movements, and when you are eliminating a trauma, yes, sometimes I see that, what you're talking about. The other day I had a fellow that, some people just start laughing. All I can tell you is when they release their distress, they just have uncontrollable laughter. Those are fun. But unfortunately, it's like 1 out of 10. But when they do it, they just start laughing. Others start yawning. Some others belch. So there's just these things that happen when you release this emotional tension that sometimes are highly physiological in that way. And I like the laughers. It's just fun. Yes.
I haven't heard you speak about past life experiences, and if there's a category in these examples that
The focus is on extended human capacities. If you see past life awareness as an extended human capacity, you could put it in that. But I was talking more about physical, psychological extended capacities in the here and now. But as far as past lives are concerned, if I'm going to pursue resolution of a trauma, I don't have a preference whether it's this life, past life, or whatever. I just want to get the job done. And sometimes past life phenomena do emerge, and I work with that as though we just want to get that taken care of so that we can get the trauma completed. I have a bias. I work with people of all faiths, and they tell me all kinds of things. So if I have to operate within their paradigm, I will do that. My job is just to get the trauma completed. And past lives can come up.
I just noticed you had telepathy up there, which would be more of a future.
No, telepathy is being able to read each other's minds, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then I do have prophecy as well.
Bringing it into the, but I was just wondering if I missed the part in there that said something about.
No, I didn't list that, but I have no problem should that emerge. How are we doing on time, Joe?
We have about 5 minutes. I do have one question,
Okay,
Steve.
sure.
in your experience, is there a common denominator with people that have these abilities? I think it'd be safe to assume that most folks on the planet do not have the ability, for lack of a better term, they have the ability, and we don't develop it. But for those that have these abilities that you speak to, is there a common denominator? For example, if someone has the ability to astral travel, or telepathy, or automatic writing, spiritual healing, can you speak to how these abilities serve this population?
That varies on how they go about it. You could utilize it, but so what I always guide them is, as long as it's congruent with your best spiritual path, it's fine to develop these abilities. Should they take you on a sidetrack tour, then it's not on course with it, and that's what their objective is. Because I think that's what they're for. I'm trying to remember the rest of what you said. I was going to respond to it, but one of my abilities is not spontaneous memory recovery. Because what's the first thing you said?
Well, I was just wondering if there was a common denominator.
Well, basically, yes and no. Some people, of course, are going to develop easier. For whatever reason, they have a sensitivity, but you can learn it. Okay, my meditation went for 45 years, almost every day. These things, if you're dedicated, you can do that. In the U.S. of A., you try to teach somebody meditation, and they fall off the wagon pretty quick. It's not a part of our lifestyle, a part of our culture. So the profound effects happen with daily, repeated meditation for a long period of time. That's when you have these abilities seem to emerge, and we can count on most Americans not being diligent enough to do it daily. Has been my experience. I would like for them to be. If we can get them all to do it, to meditate every day for years, I think you would see a different world. And there are people talking about it, but I just see a problem with people being disciplined to do that here. Whereas if you were in India, where it's supported by the culture, it's the norm. That's just what they do. So we're, as Americans, struggling to actually do those skills. And those people that do yoga, how many people are dedicated for daily for years? That's another method that could take you there. This work, fortunately, usually doesn't take that long with the ETT process. But I would have to say that with my healing work, I at one point was really just completely dedicated, and it emerged for me. So I think that you can certainly help it along. It may take one person longer than somebody else. And the healing capacity, what's interesting is, I was at this healing conference, and they were saying, it doesn't have to do with your intelligence per se. One guy was saying, he knows a profound healer. He says, she's dumb as a rock, but she's a great healer. You don't necessarily have to have everything in order to do some of these things. You can have skills that, have you ever noticed skills of somebody that you don't think has very much skills, when they surprise you with what they're able to do? So I wouldn't rule out that everybody could do it, but some have to work at it more than others. Everybody can probably do math, but some of us have to work at math a lot harder than the others. It's just like any other set of skills. But it's not, again, my focus is not just to develop these extended capacities, it's to develop your spirituality. If for you, prayer is your greatest spiritual gift, and it moves your life in the best possible direction, that's it. Now, if seeing dead people is what happens for you, then that's your path. We got to find out what is authentic to each person. Yes?
Yeah, that was my question as you were speaking. So you determine by questioning the person what their spiritual path is? So then you can keep them on the path?
When they're confused, I help them figure it out for themselves as best I can. I'd prefer to help people find it for themselves through the methods I use than tell them what it is. I don't pronounce, you must do such and such. It's a dialogue. It's a process that I try to help them discover it within them. I think we're just loaded with potential that's not activated nearly as far as it could be. And there are ways to do it. Let's talk about physical pain control. For example, when you're in a car wreck, research shows that people immediately after the car wreck, they think they're fine. and then the next day they feel it. Well, that is our own endogenous opioid system in action. I mean, we can stop the pain. Now, we don't know how to do that outside of a surprise accident, but you can develop that skill, and those skills have value. But on the other hand, pain may have a message for you as well. So there's a way to make friends with your body and let that take place. Okay, I don't know what you said, but you got me carried away in a little direction. I hope it was helpful. Yes.
You were going to demo somebody with a goggle?
All right. Does anybody in discomfort at this moment? What kind of discomfort do you?
I have really bad tinnitus in my ears, and I've also got a peroneal nerve in my legs that's damaged.
Okay. Well, does it hurt right now? And what degree does it hurt from 1 to 10?
The leg or the tinnitus?
Take your pick.
I'll do the leg. Okay.
The leg.
6.
Okay. Well, come on up here. We'll do this. This won't take long. Come have a seat right here. I need you to face this direction. What's your name?
Allison.
Allison. Okay. All right, Allison. Pain in which leg?
Left.
Okay, left leg. Oh, I happen to be really good with the left leg. You just happened to hit one of my best points. Okay. So, what is your emotional response to that pain?
Disgusted because I work in pain management.
Okay. Okay. Take your glasses off. Put your glasses there. Place these on if you would. Now wait a minute. First, let me show you. You're to look straight ahead, not out the open windows.
Oh,
Okay.
not through the windows.
No,
okay.
the windows are supposed to stimulate the periphery.
Okay.
So I have it at 3 o'clock right now. You need to make sure you look to the left of that. Okay. Allison, is that the name?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, wait, where do I look again?
Okay, no, you're just looking to the left of the open windows.
Okay.
Okay, describe the pain in your knee. Is it what did you?
It actually, that's weird. I told you my leg, and the whole time you were putting these on me, I was like, I need to tell him it's my knee, from my knee down.
Okay.
Good deal.
Okay, so what do you?
It's from my knee down, and it's really bad on the side of my leg and the top of my foot.
And it feels exactly the same right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, close your eyes. We have to find which angle is going to affect her. Okay. Allison, open your eyes, look to the right of that opening. Tell me what you notice in your left leg.
Nothing yet.
Okay, what about the reaction you have to that discomfort? What did you say it was?
Disgust.
Disgust, okay. Does that feel exactly the
No,
same?
I'm okay with the disgust as soon as I tell you about it.
Okay, all right. Okay, eyes closed. I have to check different angles here to get the right one. Okay, let's see what we can do here. Look above the open spot and
Wow, it's making my eyes itch.
making your well, that no extra charge for that.
Okay.
Okay. So, and tell me about your knee. What do you experience?
It actually feels heavier. The whole leg feels heavy. Still feels the same as
Well-
far as the pain.
Okay. Well, that's my heavy leg
Okay.
process.
Okay.
No, suggest that something is changing. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's impacting you. Okay. It wasn't heavy before.
No.
Okay. Eyes
And
closed.
my eyes weren't itching either. Ugh.
Eyes closed. Okay. Well, hang on.
Okay.
Hang on. Let's see what happens. It didn't happen at the other
Stirring
two
up
angles.
something.
It didn't happen on the other two angles, but it happened here. Okay. Now look straight ahead. And tell me about the disgust still there? Do you still feel the knee?
No, the disgust is fine. I could laugh about it.
So what about your knee? What do you notice in that leg?
Pain still, same.
Okay, what about the
It's
heaviness?
stronger in my foot right now.
What's stronger in your foot?
The heaviness and the pain.
Okay, so the heaviness is an unpleasant experience? Or
I just noticed it.
it's just an
It's
odd
different than it was
experience?
when I sat down.
Okay, so this is, I'm trying to produce odd experiences. If that was my goal, we would have already achieved it.
There we go.
Okay, let your eyes close. Okay, let me switch here to a 7 o'clock position. See, I just met her, so I don't know which one's going to work. But, okay, open your eyes. Look to the right and above the open area. Okay. So, Just describe what you notice in your knee,
Well-
your leg.
My leg for a minute got lighter. I would say my foot felt better for just a couple seconds.
Okay. All right.
It
And
was interesting.
okay. Have you ever felt it change like that?
Yes, after certain treatments, after laser treatments and light treatments. I've
Okay.
had it, yeah.
Okay. So, is it still the same?
No, it's gone. It was kind of just a quick thing.
Okay. All right. That's my quick process. Okay. Let your eyes close. Let's see what we can do here. All right. Go into another position. See, there's like all the different clock positions. I don't know for sure which one at this point might affect her. So we're seeing if any of them do. So what's your experience with your knee this time?
Pretty normal.
Pretty.
Pretty the same as always.
So
I guess.
the level of discomfort is the same?
Mhm.
Okay. I think I might want to go back to when you had that little quick change. Let me try that for a second here. All right. Okay, open your eyes and tell me what it's like at this point.
Is it up and to the right?
Yeah,
I definitely, wow, I do feel little flashes of normalcy. I
okay.
want to take this home and use it for the next week.
Well, that's a big difference.
Yeah, it's, and, as soon as I start talking about it, it's gone, but it was longer this time than it was
Okay,
a few
so
minutes ago, so.
tell me what you notice when you pay attention to your leg at this point.
Well, I noticed that I can move my foot around a little bit more. It's because, so what happens is the pain is blocking sensation, so there's like a proprioception issue. And what happened is I had a flash of like being able to feel my foot normally for a second or two.
What about right now?
Made me want to move it around. Oh, wow, it's much better now.
Okay, can you give me a number of where it is?
3.
Okay. What about now?
The same.
Okay, 3.
Mhm.
So it's going on the way
It's
down?
better. Mhm.
Okay. Notice the instant it got better when we have specific, now this is not a fancy high-tech deal, is it? Okay. All right. So, all right, now watch what happens when it's better. So tell me about that leg and foot that you're checking out.
Well, I'm feeling it. I mean, when it feels like you have alligator clips all up and down your leg and it feels like somebody took maybe 2 or 3 of them off, you want to move it around.
Okay. So that means it's feeling better.
Yeah, I can feel a distinct impact now.
Okay. And what are you noticing? I'm making a change here. Is it changing in any way?
No, well, it's easier to move my foot.
Okay.
What are you doing?
Okay. So,
Am I supposed to still be up and right?
yeah,
Okay.
it's working. Keep looking left to the right. So what's happening with that leg and foot?
Oh, it's a little numb and tingling again now. It's not as good as it was just a second ago.
Okay. All right. So what's happening at this point?
Can I take this home?
I guess she likes it, huh?
I'm down to like a 3 now.
All right.
I can feel my foot more than I have in 2 years.
Okay. All right.
Interesting.
Wait till I really get going. I'm just warming up. Okay. Let's try this. See what happens. Let's see what this would do. Let's just give this a shot. Now, what are you noticing there now? See the peripheral angle where she's looking, it's reflecting in that angle. Not an accident, these are selected. And so what's happening?
I don't notice anything in particular. I'm still okay.
Okay, what about this?
Oh, wait, no, put it back. Whatever you did, I liked it better.
Okay. Notice that when you find the spot, it changes rather quickly. and the whole physiology starts shifting.
Yeah, that's weird. The minute you moved away, I was like, no,
Okay.
come back.
All right. So I'm probably going to stay here the rest of the night with her doing this the way she wants it. But let me just stop now. I just wanted to show you the impact.
Thank
Okay.
you so
Wait a minute.
much.
Hey, what I want you to do is I want you to memorize what you're seeing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because you can bring it back by closing your eyes and picturing what you just saw.
Oh,
Okay.
interesting. Okay.
Okay, close your eyes. Take the goggles off with your eyes closed. Well, what I was trying to show you is that these things are very fast at changing both physical and emotional states. And thank you for volunteering
Thank you
here.
very
I
much.
appreciate it.
I'm very intrigued.
So, how's it mean? Okay. I think we are out of time now. So I want to thank all of you for coming to this event. And I hope those of you that have extended human capacities feel a little bit more nurtured and supported by this presentation. Thank you for honoring me for being here. Thank you.